Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 14 years, and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Are you doing well today, lovely listener? Thanks for downloading this episode. I hope you've had a great week since last week's episode. Speaking of which, have you heard episode 63 with Brandon Hayden yet? It's received some really great feedback. So many people were so inspired by Brandon's message and positive energy. So if you haven't yet, make sure you give it your ears. So what have you been making recently? Over the last week or so, I've made a zip-up bomber jacket for my daughter. I used some Ponte Roma that's been in my stash for over 10 years and some printed scuba that a friend gave to me about 3 years ago. I used the Billy and Betty bomber pattern by Threads by Caroline, and I followed the instructions in their additional blog posts to line it with more of the scuba to make it function better as a jacket. I've had so much fun making it, and I can't wait for her to try it on later. Sustainability-wise, I've been up to more of the activities that I've spoken about before, really. Using the Olio app to give away some items that my kids have grown out of, trying to navigate Halloween with as little unnecessary consumption of new stuff as possible, making some fig jam from a massive bag of figs that were given to us by a neighbour to make the most of those, and buying some garlic bulbs to grow our own organic garlic for next year. I'd love to hear what sustainability endeavours you've been up to, so please drop me a line, either via email, zoe@checkyourthread.com, or via Instagram @checkyourthread. It's been a truly epic week for Check Your Thread via Patreon this week. I have 8 new patrons to thank for signing up to support the podcast and help keep new episodes coming. Massive thanks to Helen, Jackie, Rianne, Annette, Kristin, Liz, Elaine and Donna. Plus, enormous thanks to existing patrons Norma and Imogen, who very kindly upped their pledge amount this week. I'm putting this wonderful wave of support down to how much people enjoyed hearing from Brandon last week. I plan to continue to bring you a wide range of fascinating and inspiring guests, plus solo episodes on interesting topics. If you've connected with the podcast and would like to be part of making this happen, please sign up at patreon.com/checkyourthread or find the link via the website checkyourthread.com. Speaking of solo episodes on interesting topics, let's get into today's offering. As you'll hear, it's entirely thanks to a listener called Hannah, who put the topic of trends up for consideration. I've been fascinated by trends and what they say about society for as long as I've been interested in clothes, and I had such a great time thinking about and writing this episode. As ever, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topics brought up in this podcast, so please don't be shy in telling me what you think, or of your experiences or your approaches to sewing trends. My inbox and IG DMs are always open. But on to the episode. Enjoy! You know those articles about dressing more sustainably? They almost always include a point about investing in classic, well-made pieces that won't look dated and will see decades of wear. I don't know about you, but then I picture a classic white button-up shirt, basic black wool trousers, a trench coat and a blazer. None of which I personally would want to wear, let alone try to muster up the excitement to sew. And often when we talk about sewing a more sustainable wardrobe, what springs to mind is boxy linen dresses in neutral colours. If that's what you want to make and wear, then awesome. But a more sustainable wardrobe needn't look like that for everyone. I harp on a lot about my own personal definition of what a sustainable wardrobe should contain, which is items that fit your body, your lifestyle, and appeal to your personal taste. And whilst I stand by that definition, I acknowledge that it doesn't quite cover the whole picture. Because the last element, the personal taste one, for most people isn't static. Almost everyone who's interested in clothes enough to make them at least, will experience some gradual change in their personal taste. Very few of us are wearing the exact same style of items that we did 15 years ago. Equally, when a loved garment eventually wears out beyond repair, very few of us would attempt to create an exact replica. The speed at which our personal tastes change is different for different people. For some, it might be rapid and their wardrobes might look entirely different every couple of years. For others, the changes will be more subtle, with gentle shifts in silhouette or the occasional adoption of a new colour perhaps. Often, of course, this speed has a correlation with age. Whether we think of it in these terms or not, the changes our wardrobes undergo are due to our interaction with trends. Interacting with trends is often what drives us to sew. Trends cause us to evolve. I'm talking about trends because I've been having an interesting email exchange with a listener named Hannah. Hannah kindly sent in a question for the first birthday Ask Me Anything episode, which was episode 53. Hannah asked, what is a fashion trend you've seen going around the sewing community that you do not like? Also, what's your relationship to trends? Which were possibly my favourite questions of the episode, and they led to a really great discussion with Naomi and Julia and myself, and I've been thinking about the topic on and off ever since. Hannah has given me permission to quote from her subsequent emails. Hannah writes, I've been pulling myself away from fast fashion for the past few years, and these days I'm pulling away from any brand new ready-to-wear clothes. But it's always surprising how the fast fashion mindset shows up. I've been sewing for many years but got obsessive only in 2021. And for my first year of consistent sewing, I really found myself gravitating towards sewing a lot of trendy clothes and statement pieces. I bought fabrics on a whim, I bought patterns on a whim, I made something because everyone else on sewing Instagram made it. I found myself wanting to sew at a pace that was not possible for me, and wanting to add clothes to my wardrobe without any intentionality about how it fits into my life. The fast fashion mindset is so sneaky. You always want the new thing, the trendy thing, the fast thing. It doesn't help that what's popular on the more sustainability-minded side of sewing doesn't appeal to me. I have a hard time picturing myself in the zero-waste patterns, and a lot of the sustainable fabrics are out of my price range. I love bright colours and fun patterns, so a capsule wardrobe where every piece is matched with others is easier said than done. I also love making bold statement pieces. I've made a few wardrobe basics, but I've found I enjoy them way less, which is kind of silly, but at least I know this about myself. So, I found Hannah's points really interesting. You might assume that trends are the antithesis of dressing and sewing more sustainably. And as a proponent of being more sustainable wherever possible, you might think that I'd be attempting to ward you off from sewing trendy garments. But honestly, I don't think that there's anything wrong with trends per se. As I mentioned in the episode, I feel that they're a fascinating reflection of society and culture, and the garments we choose to wear are a way to interact with what's going on. Even those of us who don't make all the latest style trends are still interacting with others visually through what we wear. Trends don't always mean what's going on the catwalk or what random celebrities are wearing. I think they're harder to track than that and way more interesting. As I see it, trends are collective reactions to or interpretations of what's going on in the world. Those reactions and interpretations might be experienced widely, or they could exist within a smaller community or subculture. Somehow and in some way, they take on physical manifestations. Sometimes it's easy to pinpoint. So, for example, a certain designer creates a particular garment that hits the collective cultural nail on the head so accurately that it becomes a moment. The garment or elements of the garment then get copied or reinterpreted because it just feels so right for that point in time for many people. This is usually referred to as the trickle-down effect. But other times, it's something that seems to bubble up from the collective consciousness, almost out of the air around us. Collective vibes and flavours somehow become styles, looks, details and silhouettes. I don't know about you, but I find how these weather fronts of influence move, warp, wane and interact to be really enthralling. Whether you choose to reject them, or how you choose to adopt or interpret them into your own wardrobe, either consciously or subconsciously, is a whole other fascinating layer. So whilst you might not have a subscription to Vogue or have any idea of who the latest pop stars are, if you have any kind of active cultural life or are part of any type of community, you will be experiencing influences that will to some degree affect you and most likely your wardrobe. It's why I might not see my best friend for months, but when we finally meet up, we find we're both wearing dungarees. So trends are energy, evolution and change is natural and change is healthy. How can we simultaneously enjoy and engage with trends whilst creating garments that we will get a lot of wear from over the course of years rather than months or weeks? Is it even possible? I believe so. As with so many things in life, it's going to be about striking a balance. So first, I think we need to accept that garments do not last forever. Clothes are fun and sewing is fun. You've got to feel good in something or you're not going to wear it. And whilst we should aim to make garments with longevity, something that you loved and felt so right in for, say, 2 years, and it saw a ton of use in that time, is probably better than the classic wardrobe staple you convinced yourself you should make, but which only comes out 2 or 3 times a year. Clothes are expressive, and as tools of communication, we have to accept that what we want to say will change over time. But garments are not solid objects that once hemmed cannot be reworked. If you make a garment and over time it starts to feel stale or boring, and if it's not saying what you want it to say, there are almost always ways to reinterpret something to make it feel fresh and relevant for you again. But how do you decide what's worth the time, energy, effort and resources to make it in the first place? Which trends are for you, and which should you observe but not engage with? So when you initially observe a trend coming through, a new sleeve shape perhaps, or a sewing pattern that seemingly everyone is making, apply an initial gut check. If it immediately speaks to you, log it in the memory bank and observe it for a while. If it doesn't immediately speak to you, that doesn't mean that you won't ever want to interact with it. Sometimes it takes time and a few different interpretations for it to mean something to you. When it comes to trends in the sewing community, the longer you wait, the more examples and versions you will see to help you decide. One of the examples I gave in the first Birthday Ask Me Anything episode was collars with a ruffled edge. This style has been popularised in recent years by the design brand Garni. The first interpretation in the sewing community that I remember seeing was the Bakerloo pattern by Nina Lee. Personally, the scale of those collars seemed too extreme for me, and the potential for them to flap around in the wind was also a bit off-putting. Later, Fibre Mood released the Honey Top pattern in edition 12 of their magazine, which had a scaled-down version that sat more like a regular shirt collar, which I've since made and adore. However, beware that the additional exposure can wear you down and cloud your judgment, so remember to cross-reference with your initial gut check. Offering a tale of caution, Hannah writes, I just finished making a garment this week that I decided to make after seeing it all over the sewing Instagram. When I first saw it over a year ago, I thought it wouldn't be for me, but seeing it over and over, I thought maybe I was wrong. Despite everything I wrote earlier about the gut checks, I make sure I do when I plan my makes, I was still influenced to make it. And I hate it on me. It doesn't suit me at all. It's a puff sleeve blouse, which are very trendy right now. I look like a Victorian ghost who got an office job. I love that idea, Hannah. When I first read your email, I laughed for about 3 hours. If your gut isn't always trustworthy, another filter that Hannah suggested that she picked up elsewhere is asking yourself if you would have been into this if you'd seen it 3 years ago. If you're an avid collector of style inspiration, via Pinterest perhaps, looking back through the older images and ideas you've collated will help you answer this one. For example, looking back at my Pinterest boards, I have proof that I've been into shoulder ruffles for years, as I've saved lots of pictures of them when they've popped up on my radar in the past. Same with sailor style trousers. I've been into that button front detail for decades, even as I've gone through some pretty radical personal style changes. Also, ask yourself, does this garment, silhouette or detail work with your lifestyle and the rest of your wardrobe? Full balloony sleeves are hard to stuff under cardigans and blazers. Cropped trousers with bare ankles aren't great for those in cold climates. Similarly, high pie crust collars or quilted jackets are not ideal in hot climates. Often there are ways to interpret something so that it could work for you, but generally speaking, if the answer's a hard no, then admire it from afar and plan a different project. Oftentimes, a trend that's seeping into the sewing community is a reflection of what's going on in clothing and fashion more broadly. If there's something you've had your eye on, it's very likely that you could find some similar examples in high street shops. Go and try them on to determine if they look and feel good before you commit to making your own. Honestly, I don't do this as much as I should. And if you have sewing friends in real life, you might be able to try on projects that they've made. My friend Naomi doesn't know this yet, but I've been eyeing up her quilted jacket that she made using the Molly jacket pattern by Fibre Mood, and I plan to try it on to see if the volume and proportions work for me before I commit to making my own. Consider if there's a way to dip your toe into a trend, but keeping it safely within your comfort zone. Can you add a new feature to a tried and tested pattern? For example, if there's a neckline that you like that you've seen on a lot of blouses, but blouses aren't your thing, could you add it to a dress pattern that you enjoy making and wearing? And as Naomi pointed out in the episode, trends in colour can be adapted to work for you. Take one of Naomi's favourite colours, lilac. There are pinky lilacs, bluey lilacs, grey-based lilacs, brighter, bolder lilacs, more muted lilacs, paler ones, darker ones verging on purple. You get the idea. Hem lengths are another aspect that people have particular preferences around and are easily adapted. A maxi dress pattern can still be for you even if you prefer a midi and so on. And finally, remember that fabric choice and styling can have a dramatic effect on the overall look. If you're considering trying balloony sleeves, could you make a version in your favourite fabric type? For example, some dreamy double gauze. Pattern brand By Hand London very cleverly styled their Sandeep dress pattern in both a creamy sateen looking fabric suitable for a fancy event and a black based floral fabric that they had paired with some Dr. Martens. Once again, that's the benefit of waiting a while for some other versions to spring up before jumping into a trend. But if you decide to go for it and it turns out that it isn't for you, or over time it no longer feels right, don't hesitate to have a think about how it could be reworked and get the unpicker out. It's not doing anyone or anything any favours by leaving a garment unworn in your wardrobe. Take a listen to episode 52 with Bella Goncharovich. Towards the end, she talks about how she often creatively reinterprets garments for clients that she makes clothes for. Okay, to summarise, if a style trend is coming through and you're trying to decide if it's something to engage with or not, take the following steps. Do a gut check. How do you feel straight away? Would you have been into it 3 years ago? Wait for a while so you get to see more versions and interpretations of it pop up, but be aware of the effects of increased exposure. Ask yourself if it would work for the climate you live in. Would it work for your lifestyle? If it's suitable for neither your occupation nor how you tend to spend your leisure time, then it doesn't make any sense. Try on some examples in a shop to get an instant idea if it will work for you. Think about how you can blend the new element with others that feels comfortably within your existing style wheelhouse. And remember, if you go for it, but it doesn't work out for you in the short term or over time, there's most likely something you can do to rework it and make it feel exciting again. I'm going to leave the last word for Hannah. Trendy elements are fun, stylish, and can make you feel fashionable and awesome. I don't think trends are good or bad at all. For me, it's more about bringing awareness to the role trends play in my life so that I can have agency in the fashion and sewing choices I make. Amen. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!